Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Spirit Anointed Leadership. So blessed to have you with us today. Remember, this podcast and VCast is all about equipping, empowering, and encouraging you as we go after the mission together. And remember that we want to do that with a well-ordered soul, which is why I'm so blessed that I've got Mindy back with me again today. Mindy, thanks so much. So if you haven't watched episode 1, you need to go back and watch or listen to episode 1, because in that episode, it really kind of set the stage. You and your husband planning this church, you hit a wall in year 5, and you end up with some significant neurological issues, and you're trying to figure out, okay, where is God in all this? But you determine, I'm going to do life differently, and I'm going to set some things in motion to do life differently. And that's where I think a lot of our pastors and leaders are. So talk to us, Mindy, about how Holy Spirit and what Holy Spirit taught you concerning setting some things up differently in your life. You've got so much to teach us. I want to learn, so go for it.
Thank you. No, it's an honor to be with you guys. And I will say that I think one of the biggest blessings in my life that the Lord gave me in that season was a deep refusal to go backwards. I didn't know the way forward, but I knew I could not go on with the very driven, kind of typical classic high octane leadership language that had kept me going in very unhealthy ways for a long time about, harnessing my gifts and being strategic. And those things aren't bad, but when they're your fuel, they are very toxic fuel sources. And so I needed to learn how to unplug from all that and find a way of life that grounded my person in the real-time presence of the living God, which is our message anyway. It's not like it's a new message or a new thought, but somehow we kind of miss it along the point of being so busy and productive. And so for me, I kind of say, Chris, that I had to learn new ways of being in my own skin. I had to learn new ways of being with other people. And I had to learn new ways of being in God's presence. Like, we're so used to being quite agendaed. Like, here's what I'm here to talk about. Here's what we're here to learn about. I had to learn how to just rest my soul in God's presence in a form of prayer that I just call silent prayer. And it made no sense. Like, prayer is supposed to be about words, right? And things we're saying or hearing or whatever. And it's like, to just rest your soul in God's presence is useless. It's not productive. It's not all those other things that we're used to optimizing for.
And yet there's this verse that says, "Be still and know that I am God." I think that comes from somewhere. I can't remember.
Somewhere. I don't know. I think I've heard it. Somebody said it once. Actually, the verse that has been so compelling to me and how that prayer was introduced to me is from Psalm 131 and verse 2. It says, "I've stilled and quieted my soul like a weaned child on its parent's lap or its mother's lap." And it's a picture of a more mature child that is contented and there for the sake of the relationship, not needing anything, not clamoring for anything. And so learning that way of prayer, I would say, was one of the early steps for me to learn how to just rest my soul in God's presence that I just didn't even have a category for before it was introduced to me. And it was very transformational. And the person said, you should do this twice a day for 20 minutes. And so a little bit of like light mindfulness technique. Like, here's a word or phrase that you want to call back to mind when your thoughts start to run crazy, and which they do and will. And so how do you take that thought captive to the obedience of Christ and say, no, this time is about yieldedness or surrender or wholeness or healing or Jesus or whatever's the word. And just, it's not a like open your mind to the universe. I think that's a terrible idea, but in a very Trinitarian way, to rest your soul in the presence of God, with an attitude of openness and contrition and longing. Like, that was new to me. And I was in a season, I had 3 young kids. I was like, I don't even get a shower every day. I can't do this twice a day for 20 minutes. But I was like, all right, I could try this for 20 minutes a day and let the dishes not get done. Let that email not get sent, although there was no emails at that time. But all those things, I just had to learn to let go of all the things that I normally was driven by and learn to rest my soul in God's presence. And guess what? He heals, he moves, he breathes new life into weary souls. And you don't feel it in the moment, but over time, there's a deep work that's happening at a level below words. And
wait. Say that again. That's a beautiful phrase, Mindy. Sorry to interrupt you. There's a work that's go.
The level below words. We're
That's
so about
powerful.
words. We want to understand. We think we know what God's working on this area of my life or whatever. It's like, we don't know. The best we could do is let the Holy Spirit meet us as openly as we know how. And it turns out that way of being open with God trains your soul on how to be quiet and how to rest and become open to other people, open to what is really going on in your own head. Like, you can start to reflect differently. There's just all kinds of, I believe, capacities that open up to us when we learn the way of disciplining our mind to rest in God's presence, and yes, to be still and know that He is God. So that that was a big practice for me.
Would you mind, and I know you've gone on now, which is great, but would you mind going back and just giving us a couple of the words that at the beginning of that process for you? Obviously, you're seasoned in it now, and so there can be any number of words that the Holy Spirit might encourage you. But when you began that spiritual practice of just being silent, but having a word that if your mind started wandering, you could bring back, give us a couple of those words that you used in the early years of your experience with this.
I could even pull out my journal, because now I tend to write down whatever that word is in the morning. And
Okay.
because they become significant to me. Some people have the same word they return to all the time. I find part of the practice that's helpful to me is to enter this time, this 20 minutes, and I set a timer on my phone.
Okay.
And I start with, God, what is it that I am most hungry for right now? What am I most desiring from you? What am I most needing? And sometimes the word might be, and here's some examples, might be peace. It might be mercy. It might be forgiveness. It might be grace. It might be Holy Spirit. It might be Jesus. It might be healing or wholeness or grace. And for me, even that, like, it feels very current to me that day to then go, okay, not only just in general am I using this to return my focus to stillness? It's today. It's, that's right, God, this time is about wholeness. I just want to be quiet. So that remains an open daily question for me of like, what is my need today?
But you know what I love? Yeah, power. What I love about that, Mindy, what I just absolutely love about that is the fact that sometimes my guess would be that perhaps you'd use the same word for a little bit of a season, and that's fine. I mean, and there's no legalism. We're trying to stay away from this concept of legalism, but for a fresh word, just to say, God I'm happy, God, if you want me to meditate on the same word today that we did yesterday. But is there a fresh word today? And really, where is my soul today? Being, how many times does David or the psalmist talk about their soul and this concept of, of being in tune with your soul? And so I loved your question. What is my soul desiring, longing for?
Yes, that word longing is probably the most accurate. Like, what am I longing for right now? And usually there's like 5 or 10 things at the surface. Like, I want this decision. I want this resource provided. I want this problem to go away. I want this person to go away. I want to stop doing this terrible thing, whatever it is. But you sift through all that and go, okay, what am I actually longing for? What is the thing that's underneath all of that only is available to me through God? So anyway, that's how I practice that even to this day.
This is just two people talking, hanging out on a podcast in front of other people. But do you think, I would even say that sometimes for me, that word is actually approval. Because as those who are closest to me, who are around me a lot know, there's just, a desire to be thanked. Like, I don't need to be thanked every day or even every month, but every once in a while, it's just a genuine, okay, well, where does that ultimately come from? Where it comes from a need to be approved, ultimately. And so I can either try and get that need met in some way that is not of Christ, right? Or I can sit with him and say, okay, I'm seeing yesterday, if I've done, if I've done Lectio Divina, if I've done the prayer of examen, if I've actually prayed the prayer of examen at the end of the day yesterday, and I've asked him, where did you show up? And then where did I sin yesterday? Then maybe one of the areas I've sinned is I said something for approval. I said something so that I would get approval from someone, and that's not of you. And so, God, I want to bring approval. Does that even make sense, Mindy, what I'm saying in that moment?
Yeah, I think the longing, if I mean, you're right. It's two friends talking in real time here. I think I would love to think that you're sitting in silence and you want your attention to be brought back to almost like not approval, but approved.
Ooh, that's good.
Loved.
Yes,
seen.
Of course. Yes.
Like these are the,
yes.
it's those are the things you're longing for, that I am approved. And that we know are true in the gospel, in the kingdom. All right.
Yes.
And so you're bringing your awareness. You're going to start worrying about something or arguing with somebody and whatever. And it's like, oh, no. This time is about approved, known, seen, loved. I don't know what that would be for you, but that's it. That's a good,
absolutely.
Good exercise.
Yeah, and you and my friend Dan Crowley, who's my spiritual director, would say the exact same thing. Yeah, it's not, approved. Okay, so Mindy, I want to give you an impossible task. You're sitting in front of a room of, 400 pastors, and and I want to be very careful here because I'm not wanting to make light of what you went through, but they're throwing up. They're not in a good place. Their spiritual practices have not been developed yet. And they don't even necessarily recognize why. So in the next 4 or 5 minutes, I just want to set you free and say, you've got this room full of men and women, because we're in the Wesleyan Church, so we actually believe that women can be senior pastors. So you've got this room full of pastors, and they're striving. They are striving. What do you say to them?
Yeah, well, men and women, first of all, along the lines of approved, I think Chris and I both would say, we see you. We see the hard work you're doing. We see the love you have for Jesus and his people. And we also see the fatigue. We see the risk of burnout. We see the risk of flame out. We see the risk of dropout. And I would say there's probably several things to say, but just first, not only do we see you, but the Lord sees you. You are not serving in isolation fundamentally. And you are loved. Your life matters. And the well-being of your soul, whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, the well-being of your soul is driving everything that matters to you. This is driving your relationships. At some level, it's driving your physical well-being. This is driving your sense of vocational alignment. This is driving your mental health, your physical health. All of these things are things that sit at the periphery of your life that you probably have more actual sensation of how are those things going, my relationships, my vocation, all those things. But what sits at the center, what's driving all those things is actually your soul, which according to Willard is the thing that's integrating all these different dimensions of personhood. And often we're like trying to go fix the things at the perimeter, and we're still pushing even harder and harder and further away from real time, in the moment connection with God. So first of all, I would just say, however you choose to care for your soul and be intentional about it, and I can offer a couple quick categories that I think are helpful and easy to remember. But the how doesn't matter as much as the intention. You need that fierce resolve. You need that deep refusal to say, I'm not going back into that insanity. And you don't need to blame anybody or make it anybody else's fault. Just be like, no, I'm doing a hard no on that former way of being. And I believe you'll be joining a lot of people in our time right now who are in the midst of that deep refusal to say, it's going to be a new day, because this is not the path forward. That's the past. And so even if you don't know the way forward, please stop and value your own life, your own soul, your own person enough to go, no more. I'm not doing this insanity anymore. This is not, come to believe, friends, that this is not the life that God is inviting you to. Orford's great way of saying it was like, what is happening that we as the leaders are not living the life that we're inviting other people into? Like that just doesn't make any sense. So
And
that life is to be yours as well.
Yes. Yes, and one of the things you said, you mentioned Willard, but this idea of his vision, intention, and means. So you said about your own story in our first podcast together that you couldn't even imagine the future, but could we take a minute and actually envision what a healthy, what might it look like if we actually did this life in a way that would be filled with joy? C.S. Lewis talks about we play around with sex and drink and all this stuff because we can't imagine what a day at the beach with God would look like. And we are way too easily pleased. There's this life that we can envision that we're being invited into by Holy Spirit. And if we can envision that, then we can set the intentions and have the means towards that. So you said you had a couple of categories that might be helpful for us.
Those means, well, let me just respond to what you just said. I think it's vital for us to enter into that imagination space. And I think of it as understanding what are the symptoms of a healthy soul? What are the symptoms of your soul when it is deeply connected with God? It's not you memorize Leviticus or you have a certain amount of character strength, all those things. Right. It's like, what is your real time in the moment sense of connection with God? And when that is strong, what flows out of you is indicative of what your soul is like when it's alive to God, when you are most alive to God. So those are worth
Amen.
reflecting on. And I can help further with that. Go to Soul Care. We'll help you with that. But
yes, please, and they'll be in our show notes, by the way. They will, all this information and her will be in the show notes. So you can go to her wonderful, incredible website, which you need to go to. I've been to, so you need to go there. But anyways, okay. So, yes.
Get clear on what that vision is. And friends, you will find that is the math that is going on in Jesus' parables about the pearl of great price. It may cost you everything. And it would be the easiest, quickest decision you'll ever make when you really understand what's at stake. You would sell everything for that pearl. Real time in the moment, not just Jesus when we die in heaven. Okay. So anyway, more can be said about that. So vision, yes, clear. Intention sort of handles itself when the vision is clear enough, and the means as well. We find a way. But the three categories that I find most helpful, and that God has actually shaped in me, and then through our ministry at Soul Care, through the team, is these three things. You can keep these things in mind. Like, how should I think about caring for my soul? The first is that you need a page. Second is a person. Third is you need a plan. And I'll explain what I mean by all three of those things. Okay. By page, I mean, that's just shorthand for an invitation to reflection. Could be in the pages of journal, could be, usually that's what form it takes. And there's all kinds of neuroscience around the benefits of writing and harnessing both sides of the brain and all that. But I'm coming to believe, Janet Hagberg and other people's, your leadership will actually be capped at the level of your capacity for self-reflection.
Yes.
You've got to develop the capacity for self-reflection. And only as you know who you really are and what you really think, can you bring that honest person into the presence of the living God. Because otherwise you're just throwing up a stiff arm and saying like, hey, God, good luck changing my life, but I can't even look at my own life. So, I won't even know if you ever do. Anyway, so that reflection is a page. Person is, we all need a safe third place. And the more advanced you are in your leadership, the less easy it is to find a safe place to be completely honest with what's the good, the bad, and the ugly, your story, your history, your current challenges, your areas of failure and flaws, but with an eye to who you're becoming. And those spiritual friendships or spiritual directors or coaches or therapists, I don't care what modality it is, and many of them, maybe all of them, are important in different seasons. But you've got to have a person. You've got to have somebody who knows the full you and is for you, is for your journey, for your healing, for your transformation, for you fulfilling the things God has written over your life. So a page, a person. And the last one is a plan, which is sort of a catch-all for all of it. But a plan is, historically, we know the idea of a rule of life, a way of anchoring certain intentions into our schedule, certain maybe rhythms of prayer, rhythms of retreat, of Sabbath, of sabbatical, of rest, of sleep, of nutrition, of movement. All these things become, and you don't need to like over architect like a plan that'll, nobody's got the time to even think that. But what are maybe 3 to 5 things in this current moment of your life that the Lord would be inviting you to anchor into a little more intentionally? So the page is an invitation to reflection. The person is an invitation to connection. And the plan is an invitation to intention. And all three of those matter a ton as you're moving forward into a healthier soul. And for God's sake, and I mean it in all the ways that could be,
Yes.
for God's sake, please do care for your soul. As the proverb writers told us, above all else, guard your heart, guard your interior person, because everything else flows from that place.
So, pastors and leaders, you can see why I'm going to beg Mindy to come back with and have another time with us again in the future. But here's what I'm begging of you now, and that is that you would take the time to think about who is your person. But first of all, what's your page? Like, write down some things the Holy Spirit is saying to you and spend some time. Go to her website. Please, please, please go to her website and let this stuff come out. What is your page? Who is your person? And I love the fact that you talked about all different kinds of modalities that could take on. And then what is your plan? And working that plan. Again, that's not legalistic, but it's an invitation. All three of these are invitations by Holy Spirit for you, because he wants you to serve out of a well-ordered soul. As Mindy beautifully said a few minutes ago, one of the things that John Ortberg, one of his gifts, I think, to evangelical Christianity is, why in the world would God invite us to express a spirituality that is not joy-filled, that we're not enjoying ourselves? Why would he invite us to invite other people to that? No. Our opportunity is to express through the way that we live a way that is winsome to others, that's inviting to others. Always be ready to share about the hope that is in you, the joy that is in you, not the fatigue that is in you, not the weariness that is in you, not the frustration that's in you. So live that out. Would you please, 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 I just want to encourage you, please live and make choices and decisions and be intentional about living out from a well-ordered soul for God's glory, for your joy, and for the good of the people that you serve. Let's do that. Thanks again, Mindy, for joining us today. Such a blessing. Let's go be Spirit-anointed leaders who are leading from a well-ordered soul. Have an awesome day.